I remember when I was a little girl, Mama was so proud of her buttonhole attachment. It was a very fancy addition to her straight stitch machine. Oh, if Mama could see these machines today with their ability to do about a zillion things creatively. Mama was an artist as well as an expert seamstress. She would have loved everything about these new machines, everything. Gorgeous and unique machine work, as well as delicate hand embroidery, will be yours for the watching today in my sewing room. I am so glad you are here with me and my guest. We're going to have a lot of fun. One of the most creative things that you can do with your sewing machine is reverse bobbin work. Let's see a few examples of this. First of all, you trace your line on because you're going to have to sew from the back. You see, this is a beautiful piece of black velvet, but we're going to sew from the back. All kinds of decorative stitches can be used with the heavier thread. That's what makes the reverse bobbin work so pretty, I think. Heavier threads. Now you think, well, do you do it with a tuck? Yes, it makes a beautiful heavy line on your tuck rather than just a regular line. You can even just take a piece of ribbon and do reverse bobbin work. I think this is a real interesting technique right here. This is for piping a biased band, reverse bobbin work, and then you can fold it and have an interesting little outside edge for your piping. Have you ever thought about reverse bobbin work in a circle? Absolutely beautiful. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is a little bit of magic. This is a new fabric that has been developed that I'm going to show you what happens. You can do straight stitching with your reverse bobbin work and then put an iron to this, and guess what happens? It crinkles up, making this most wonderful texture magic is what I call this. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my very dear friend Chris Tryon. Chris is the National Events Manager for Baby Lock USA. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here again. We're going to go through reverse bobbin work and the techniques that you need to make this great looking stitch happen. First thing you're going to do, as Martha explained, is the backing on your fabric, and that's really dependent upon the fabric that you use. On something like the cotton velveteen, I just simply left it as is, but if I go to something like a silk, I'm actually going to back it twice. I usually use a fusible knit, and then I use a heavier stabilizer. Then the most important thing that you need to do is mark from the wrong side, because you're actually going to be sewing from the wrong side. Now what you're going to do is your threads. They're going to be a little bit different than your standard sewing threads. You're going to go to a heavier thread, and where this thread is going to sit, it's actually going to sit in the bobbin case on your machine. And what we've got is we've got a separate bobbin case, and what that bobbin case has been, what's been done to it actually is it's going to be adjusted so that it can handle those threads. The tension's going to be adjusted. So all my tension adjustments or any adjustments I have are going to be done on the machine itself. Now this thread here is a 12-weight cotton, so you can use cotton threads, and then the shiny thread that looks like rayon is more like an 8-weight pearl cotton, okay? And here I've just done a simple straight stitch, simple zigzag stitch, and a serpentine stitch, so you don't have to get real fancy with your stitches, but when you select your stitches, make sure that they're very open and that they're not satin stitches. That doesn't work too well. So what I did was, when I was playing, was what could I do different than just stitching on the fabric, and that's where I came up with tucks. And the key here again is that I actually sewed on the wrong side, so I marked on the wrong side of where I wanted my tucks. Okay, and the same thing when I did the braid. I sewed on the reverse side, so I got the pretty effect on the front side. When I did the piping, what I actually had to do is, because I had a bias fabric, it tends to want to stretch a little bit, I did have to stabilize it. And here I use the quilt stitch. So what it looks like is it looks like mini candle wicking. Okay, and then we came to the circular stitch attachment. And again, what I did was I sewed on the wrong side of the fabric so that I had the pretty stitching on the right side. So let's just see a little bit about how this works. What I've done is, you can see I've marked my fabric on the wrong side, and I've set my machine up for a straight stitch, and I've lengthened my stitch out. I've taken my tension from the standard setting of about 4.5 all the way up to 9. So now all that I'm going to do is just simply follow my mark line, and I'm going to sew, and I'm sewing down the line, and when I stop, I'm going to go ahead and raise the foot. Now if you have a machine that has a thread cutter, this is where I strongly suggest that you clip your threads and not use a thread cutter, because that thread is a little bit heavier. And as you can see right here, I've got that beautiful heavy stitching. Okay. The last one was the funnest one, and this is actually a product out that's called Texture Magic. And what I did was I applied it to the back side of my fabric. I stitched my lines, and you can see the stitching. This is how it looked before. Okay. Took it to the iron, and this is how it looks afterwards. It crinkles the fabric up, and that's what there is behind reverse bobbin work.
Was it steamed when did you steam it?
No,
or dry
just a dry iron, and you literally can watch it suck.
Press it from the back or the front?
Press it from the back on the Texture Magic, and you can see how it sucks up the Texture Magic, and when it does that, it pulls all that fabric in.
And the reverse, turn it over again so we can see that.
Sure.
That
and then the reverse bobbin
stitching,
it sticks out a little bit more than a standard straight stitch would. Yes.
Oh, Chris, just such creativity with our sewing machines.
Lots of fun. They're lots of fun.
And now Chris has some sewing inspirations to share with you. Oh, Chris, this beautiful reverse bobbin work. Tell us about it.
Oh, this one was a lot of fun. This is actually silk dupioni, and what I did was, it's just a simple straight stitch, and I use that same fabric that when you apply heat to it, it shrinks it. So what it does is it creates this real neat puffing look to it. And then the belt buckle here is a vintage belt buckle that I found at an antique or thrift shop.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and this one's the same thing. It's the shrinking fabric. What I did on this one was I actually put my stitching lines a lot closer together. And the buckle in the center is actually a shoe buckle. It was just one of, a set, and that's all that they had for sale. So that's where I used it. And then on the outside, it's the same reverse bobbin work. Here I did the braid that I showed earlier. I used with the reverse bobbin work, and then the piping at the end is actually the piping I showed. It's a couple of rows of stitching, so it doesn't look like piping anymore. It looks very textured. So,
oh my goodness, how
yeah,
beautiful.
and then this one, it's just simple straight lines that crisscross, and again, we've got vintage buckles attached with braid just to give it a different look. And then what we did with this one was same thing. I used the serpentine stitch, creating a chicken wire look, and this is actually an old brooch that I just tied with grosgrain ribbon to add to the center of that one.
Ribbon. I bet a lot of us have those around.
Well, and it's broken, and I can't fix it. So what better way to use it than to put it on a pillow?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And then this one is just the circular stitch attachment, tons and tons and tons of circles. And then I used the belt loop attachment on the serger to create the tie. This is from a trinket store, and I painted it and then put foil on it and then added it kind of like a package, tying up that pillow.
Really?
Yeah.
Belts on your pillows.
Belts on your pillows.
Or packages on your pillows. Oh,
and
how
here
pretty,
this is
just
this straight stitching, and this is that tuck technique.
Chris,
and rather than just having one row of stitching, I actually added. There's actually 3 because it gave a little bit more dimension. And then the belt tie is actually all reverse bobbin work. And then again, I used an old vintage belt buckle.
I want to turn this around to show them the
back.
fabrics.
I always like to do fun things
on the back. Go with this grayish silk dupioni.
Yep.
It's a cotton fabric.
It's a cotton fabric, yeah. And I do try to do a print on the back side or something that's a little bit more exciting, so then the front is as pretty as the back is.
Chris, I just love your pillows.
Oh, thank you. They're always fun to do.
And now Chris has a So Quick, So Easy project to share with you. Chris, that is so beautiful. Tell us about it.
Oh, thanks. This is kind of a fun little grown-up art project. What you're going to do is, it's real simple. We're just going to piece fabric, so consider that your construction paper. Then we're going to do a little bit of painting, and then we're going to do some fun stitching using the Sashiko machine. So let's kind of go through the project. What we're going to do is, you can see I've picked out my fabrics, and I've chosen color coordinating fabrics. You could do fabrics that didn't coordinate if you so chose. Then what you're going to do is you're actually going to piece them together. And what I did when I pieced them, I kind of did a random piecing. So if you look at my strips, they're not all the same width. So that gave it a little bit of visual difference or visual effect to it. Then there comes the fun part. Then you're going to use fabric paint, and I just use a little sponge brush and a purchased stencil, and you actually get to paint the fabric. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch. And the great thing about this stitch is that why it's such a great embellishment stitch is there's actually a stitch and then there's a space. So as I stitch along, you'll see the actual stitch, and then you'll see a tiny little space in between, so it's not just a complete straight stitch. Okay, the final step is to then take your fabric, wrap it around a purchased canvas.
Okay.
The glue gun, no studio is complete without a glue gun, and just simply wrap it around, and you have your picture frame.
That is absolutely fascinating. And that is quick and easy.
Yes,
and
quick
this
and easy.
wonderful,
Yep.
wonderful, I believe this is originally, Sashiko is originally a Japanese.
Traditionally, it's a
By hand, sure.
hand-done stitch in which they use a heavy thread, about an 8-weight pearl cotton, and it takes them many hours to complete what we can complete in many minutes.
Well, that is fun too. And you just did your little paint on the
I did it on the
fabric,
surface of the fabric, and then you need to follow the directions on your paint. Some of them require you to heat set it with an iron. The only thing that I tend to watch is as you're stitching over, it does make this fabric a little stiff, so you kind of need to go a little bit slower as the needle is entering the paint and the fabric too.
Oh, Chris, thank you so very much
Oh, you're
for
more than
coming.
welcome.
And now I have a segment for you called And So On. I'm pleased to welcome today my friend Kari Mecca. Kari is the owner and designer of Carry Me Away. She's the author of 4 books, a frequent contributor to So Beautiful magazine, and a teacher at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion in Huntsville. Kari, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
Oh, this is so adorable. Let's just start at the top and let our viewers see these wonderful trims. Talk to me about it, honey.
Well, we've got all kinds of appliques, and they're edged with spaghetti bias. Different colors, different trims, lots of bright fabrics, combine all kinds of prints, and they're all edged, again, in spaghetti bias.
And that's what you're going to share today.
That's exactly.
How easy it is, which is what I love about everything you're doing. Oh,
Well,
me?
we
Fun,
like it
fun
easy.
and easy.
We want to
yeah.
be able to complete it in a reasonable amount of time. Okay, I have cut out my applique designs. I traced my designs onto the fabric, and then I used the applique design to trace fabric pieces to cut. Now, this piece here, this is underneath this whole piece. Cut this as one whole piece, and then lay this inner petal on top. Don't cut out that inner petal on the green fabric. We're just going to layer everything, and we're going to glue baste in place. Now, I would like for you to use just a little bit of glue, just dot, 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 right along the edge of the fabrics. It does not have to be, cemented in place. Now, after this, then we get to get out the spaghetti bias. Now, I've already done a few pieces here, so let me just outline what those are. In the center of the leaves, we have a little squiggly piece of spaghetti, and we'll put that down first so that our raw edges are covered when we do our outer edge. Then I've gone around, I've mitered at the point of my leaf, and then come back, and I'm going to join that end with my flower. And we'll just continue layering our trims, but to get your spaghetti in place, I have a couple pieces here, and I'll just show you how to glue and pin those. So we're going to get our basting glue out, and we're just going to dot, 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 like I said, tiny little bits of of glue, and I'm going to put it right on the edge of the fabric. Can you see that? Tiny little bits, and then we're going to get our pins out and we're going to pin it. Now our inner color is pink, so we're just going to pin that in place, and we want to make sure to cover the raw edge of the fabric as we do that. Once the glue is dry, we can remove the pins, and then you can take it to the sewing machine. But really, you don't need to pin it and pin it while sewing. Once it's dry, you can remove it and then go on to shaping your next layer of spaghetti. So actually, let's just take these off because it's tacky enough that it's going to stay without us having to leave the pins in. So it's easier to work as well, being able to glue baste everything in place at once before having to take it to the sewing machine. So this is a good project when you have some downtime and you just want to sit in maybe your chair, or you're away from your machine, maybe carpooling, taking the kids, doing any kind of thing where you can't be at your machine.
How about vacation? That'd be a good time to get something like that done. Just take it with you to the beach.
Oh, perfect, on the beach.
On the beach.
That's good thinking. I'm thinking carpool, she's thinking beach.
Different stage of life.
Okay, all right. I'll go to the beach with you though.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, and here's a sample showing everything glue basted in place and also how to stitch it. Look on your quilting menu or your basic utility stitch menu of your machine, and I'd like for you to find an applique stitch or a blind hem stitch. Applique is better, and that would be on the quilting menu. And how that's going to stitch, it's going to be 3 or 4 little bitty straight stitches and then a little side stitch. Now it's not usually a zigzag making a point, it's just straight over to the side and then back. Your straight stitches will be on the base fabric only, and your little side stitch that comes over grabs your spaghetti. And now I would do this with a monofilament thread, which is a clear, in the top of the machine only. Use a cotton thread in the bottom, and it should sew beautifully on any machine. We also have these stems that have finished and they're loose. I purposely didn't stitch those down because, you know, I love trims, so we're going to add a little trimmy bit to the end. I've made this little calyx, and it has a hole here with a little ribbon looped bit at the end, and we're actually just going to insert this stem into the hole. We'll just push it right through. Can you see that?
Absolutely.
And then we'll just fold it over and we'll tack it right at the base of our flower. And you can hand sew this if it's easier, which it might be. And then all your raw edges are finished and you don't have to worry about folding under and turning. And it's as easy as that.
And it's absolutely adorable. And I just thank you so much for making all these beautiful projects and for teaching us how. Thank you, Kari.
Thanks for having me.
And now I have some hand embroidery to share with you. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Wendy Schoen. Wendy is the designer of Petite Pochette Patterns. She's the author of 5 books, a regular contributor to So Beautiful magazine, and a teacher at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion in Huntsville. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Martha. Today we're going to talk about a raised fishbone stitch. Now, if you look at this little bonnet and really close up at this tiny little leaf, this little leaf is stitched in a very simple way without having to do any of the pre-padding required in satin stitch. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how it's done. It's very simple to do too. So if you look at my hoop, you'll see that I have a large leaf drawn. This is so you can see it better. You can make these any size you wish. Usually with 1 strand of thread. We're going to start by tying on with a back stitch or 2 in the center of the leaf. We're going to be covering all this area up, so it's the perfect place to start. I'm going to take tiny little stitches, and this is going to take the place of a regular stitch, or a regular tie-on stitch rather, and so you can actually remove the knot after you do that step. I'm going to start by coming in at the tip of the leaf. So this is the point and this is the base. We're coming in, we're going to take a long stitch down the center vein, and then we're going to go about 1/3 of the way back and come out on the edge of the leaf. This is a little unusual, but you'll see what happens when we do this. So now I'm going to stitch back to the tip, and ideally I would come out on the other edge, but I'm going to have to do that in 2 steps since I'm using a hoop. Remember, you never scoop when you work in a hoop, so you have to do everything in 2 steps. I'll come out at the tip, just across, very short distance away. And now I'm going to go back into the opposite edge of the leaf and down. Now, like I said before, what I am really going to try to do is come out at the other edge of the leaf, but remember, I'm going to have to do it in 2 steps. So if you remember that you're only going to be stitching a straight stitch across the leaf, basically that's what I'm doing, going back to the top and back across and out on the other edge. You're really just doing a horizontal stitch, but you're doing it in 2 steps. So that kind of simplifies it for you. Across to here, a little bit farther back each time, and then across to the opposite side. Remember, you have to move up slightly on each stitch to allow for the space that the thread will take up. So you see, I'm just going across. This is really, really simple to do, and it renders a beautiful leaf. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to fast forward to what it would look like if you got at least 9/10 of it done. Okay, so now the next thing is, oh, let me use that for my board. There we go. Okay, so you see, this is what the leaf will look like as it works its way up. If you look at the edge, you'll see that I'm actually stitching over existing stitches. Well, those show up because of the method that we're using and bringing the thread across. No, that wouldn't be right, would it? So at this point, I would take the thread from here to there. Got a little confused, Martha, because
that's okay.
This stitch is so simple that you think it's going to be even more difficult than it actually is. Okay, so we'll take the stitch in from here to here. And it's just not going to behave for me today, but anyway, you get the idea. You go from here to there, and then from there to there until you actually clean up or finish stitching the entire leaf. I'm going to go back to the old hoop so I can continue showing you that. Okay, so we're going to go across here and out here. And as you can see, the stitches are actually overlapping each other, and that's what causes the raised effect. It's a very simple stitch to do.
And a very beautiful stitch to do.
Yes,
absolutely,
it really
the
is.
Prettiest leaf, and it's especially pretty, I think, on this delicate white bonnet, and yet we've
Absolutely.
seen clearly. Wendy, thank you so much. And now I have a piece from my vintage collection to share with you. I'm always amazed when I see these beautiful dresses with their collars. Can you imagine wearing a collar like that? However, if it were the style, I guess we probably would have worn them. Look at the beautiful lace tape and all kinds of pretty laces, hand done, of course. And the lace insertion comes down. This is a miter. I think you probably know about miters. Tucks in the middle, and then we're going to come on down for some more miters down in the V shape. The sleeve is beautiful also. We have the miters and then four pieces of insertion and gathered lace, which is probably the way we finish sleeves a lot now. I think this waistline is really pretty. There is the Swiss insertion and then 2 little pieces of French insertion. The Swiss insertion and then the little French insertion. This lady was very creative in combining, even on the waistline. The skirt is beautiful. Coming down the center front of the skirt, we have more lace, French lace insertion and a mitered point. 3 of those. Then her fancy band. Let me hold it up here so you can see it. Her fancy band is beautiful. The insertion, the French insertion, Swiss insertion, French insertion. And she then has another interesting lace shape. It comes down almost in a little column, points up and then goes back. Release tucks. And this was all done. This beautiful bottom of the skirt was done on a piece of what you would call what's called eyelet fabric now, but you see it was a border fabric and she had plain fabric at the top, so she embellished it thoroughly. It's always interesting, I think, to look at the backs, and this one once again has those beautiful, beautiful tiny buttons down the back. Thank you for joining me today. Won't you come back next time?